Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Autism Stories. I'm your host, Doug Bletcher, the founder of Autism Personal Coach. Autistic people are the true experts of the autistic experience, and Autism Stories is where we interview autistic people to learn from their diverse stories, experiences, and get their insights. If you would like to be notified about each week's episode of Autism Stories, we suggest you subscribe on your favorite podcast listening platform. We would also appreciate it if you could give us a positive rating and review, as it will help others to learn about autism stories. On today's episode, T.C. Johnson joins us to discuss her film Too Autistic for Black and misconceptions about those with Caribbean backgrounds. We hope you enjoy today's conversation. TC, thanks so much for joining me here on Autism Stories.
Thanks for having me.
I'd love to start off by learning about your story. Where would you say your story in the autistic community begins?
I guess my journey in the autistic community really started when I first learned of my diagnosis, which was in 2021. But if we're not thinking about it from diagnosis, then it would have obviously started from when I was born, when my parents tried to get medical help for me. When I was when I was a baby, my mom obviously noticed that I was a lot more highly sensitive than all the other children. She obviously noticed that there was also a lot of childlike activities that I wouldn't join in on, that other children would participate in. So she had a lot of concerns about just how sensitive I was and how distressed I became at like the most minuscule things. And in the grand scheme of things, where like neurotypical would think, okay, why is she getting so upset about this tiny hair in the back, for example? But my mum noticed it didn't seem normal in comparison to the average child. So it kind of started there with me, where my parents did try to seek medical help, but were told that I was fine. So just kind of continued to raise me in it, I guess, as normally as they could. But then my journey for me personally with the autistic community started from diagnosis.
You were a TV producer who made her writer-director debut on the short film Too Autistic for Black, commissioned by Warner Brothers Discovery. So from my understanding, this was the first time you met other Black autistic people in your life. So how did that experience of connecting with others with shared experiences and cultural similarities impact you?
It was absolutely surreal. I mean, it's one thing being diagnosed with autistic, but then when you get to meet other people who look like you and share similar cultural experiences. I mean, we obviously talk about autism being this spectrum, but obviously there's nuances within that. So when you're coming from a Caribbean background or an African background or an Asian background, there were definitely cultural, the cultural similarities even with being autistic that we may have in common that say someone from an Irish or Scottish, or American background may not have. So it definitely feels like, actually, and I think there was a contributor into Autistic for Black who described this perfectly. When you're Black and autistic, you're a minority within another minority. So definitely getting to discover these different people, it was just such an amazing experience, for sure.
I think that's so important what you said, when you see people that look like you in the media and when you don't, how that changes things for you. Were there those on TV characters perhaps that maybe you initially connected with that looked like you, or maybe you felt had the same energy as you?
Growing up, no. I personally don't feel like there was any sort of characters that I resonated with on TV growing up. However, I will nod to kind of the current state of TV and digital and say that there is an effort, and I feel like the digital and TV landscape are doing a lot better when it comes to representation. Obviously, you've got to give it time. It's not going to be there yet in terms of whatever there means for different individuals. But I do think there's definitely been some effort in the programming.
Now, your film, Too Autistic for Black, is a story that explores what it's like to be Black, British, and autistic. Are there ways that you think being British has impacted your experiences of also being Black and autistic?
That's a good question. And I guess this is the perfect question, like, for you to ask, because, like, you're based in, is it America or Canada?
Yeah, in America, yes.
So you're based in America, and even being in America, there's different cultural differences with Americans and Brits, right? So we often say, like, Americans, you're quite theatrical, quite melodramatic, very expressive, and then, like, Brits are very much more reserved, and you don't quite know what we're thinking. So I think even navigating that as being British, and sort of looking at the cultural norms of what it means to be British, but then looking at the cultural norms of what it means to be Caribbean, but then also looking at the spectrum of what it means to be autistic, all those different identities combined is a lot to navigate in this travel, because being British, there is an expectation that you're not meant to be this sort of over-performative, outlandish character. You're meant to be quite reserved. There's kind of an unspoken rule of, we don't really express too much emotion. But then obviously being from a Jamaican background, it's quite similar. It's sort of, no one needs to know your business. Your business stays inside. No one needs to quite know what's going on. And then also just being autistic, it's like you're already masking. So it's kind of like you've got 3 different identities going on, but also trying to navigate that being autistic is extremely emotionally taxing.
I watch a lot of TV shows, way too many, and one of the things that I think is critical is the diversity of characters within these shows. Although it seems very rare that there is an openly autistic Black character. So where do you think we are in representation of characters and stories that connect with those that have autistic and Black identities?
I mean, it's going to differ depending what age you are. So I know there's a few programs on Netflix, for example. I use them as an example platform where they do show quite a few, they've shown programming which represents autistic characters. So I know there's Pixar's short film called The Loop, and that sort of showcased the dynamics between like a Black male teenager and a biracial, non-verbal autistic girl. And then also I know they have other programs where, I can't remember what the program's called, but there's a children's show on Netflix where one of the Black characters has an autistic cousin. So I know that there are, like I said, there are efforts being made to showcase not just autistic characters, but autistic characters from different backgrounds and different communities, which I think is really important. In terms of programming for adults, I haven't personally seen that representation yet, and I'm not saying it's not there, I just haven't seen it, which means I guess there is space to do more.
There's space to do a lot more. I haven't seen it either, and obviously there's a long way to go in terms of autistic representation, but I would absolutely love to see that representation a lot more. I read off camera you can be found inspiring the next generation of filmmakers. Do you have advice for autistic filmmakers that want to be creating stories that are important to them, just like you have done?
I just think if you've got a story to tell, then tell it. And even if you look and think, wow, for example, some people who are autistic may look at me and think, wow, she's made a film about something that I was really passionate about. You may say that you wanted to tell the story of what it's like to be Black and autistic on the spectrum, but there's never too many stories out there, and your perspective matters. So if that's a story that you want to tell, then tell it. Just find a different way of doing it. So I would encourage anyone out there, and specifically if you are autistic, don't get held back or be fearful that, that story's already been told. There's always room to tell your story from a different perspective. So I'd really encourage you just to get out there and start creating.
Yeah, I mean, how many stories are there on war, or how many superheroes?
We can never get enough of the royal family. Like, how many documentaries do we need to be about the royals? But they're always constantly being made because there's always a new perspective to tell.
I was just going through Netflix, I think, yesterday, and I couldn't believe how many dating reality shows there are.
They will never run out of finding a new way to talk about love. They never will.
No. beyond Too Autistic for Black, you worked on many other media projects. So I'm wondering, what are some projects you're inspired to create maybe now or in the future?
Well, I guess the topic that I'm most passionate about at the moment is definitely neurodiversity. I'm also really passionate about my Caribbean heritage and just making sure that, we are dispelling those single narratives when it comes to certain stories that are told about Caribbean as specifically Jamaican culture in the media. And I'm also just passionate about colour. And you'll notice this if you have watched Too Autistic for Black. One of my ways of really kind of standing out creatively is by making sure that I incorporate sort of like very bold images and colour in the work that I do. So those are kind of the things that I'm really passionate about. So yeah, I hope to kind of keep telling stories in sort of those areas, really.
Are there some misconceptions about Jamaican heritage that you think you would love to dispel with your storytelling?
Of course, most of the time, people who are very ignorant and probably not very well-travelled will constantly just assume that Jamaican culture is just about smoking weed and, the men having lots of children everywhere. And it is really upsetting because that is my culture. I'm not saying I own it, but that's who I am. And I'm very proud to be Jamaican and British. So when I hear people sort of say things like that, I find it really upsetting because I'm like, well, you don't know the culture and you clearly haven't taken the time to discover what it truly is about. And there is more to us than just reggae music and food. While those are elements of the culture that I fully embrace and that I take pride in, there is so much more colour and diversity to our culture. So yeah, that is something that I would like to share with people.
And lastly, how can our listeners learn about you beyond this interview?
You can check me out on social media. I do try and put out as much as I can. I'm still quite protective of myself as a person, and I'm sure autistic people can relate to this if you're listening. But yeah, I am trying to share more of my work, more of sort of my story and more information across social media. So please keep up with whatever you can keep up with. I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, I'm on X, and I'm also on YouTube.
Well, I will definitely be following. I'm looking forward to learning about all of your future projects. So thanks so much for joining me today, TC.
And thanks for having me.
Thanks so much to TC for the conversation. To learn more about TC, please check out the link in the podcast description for this episode. We always love hearing from you and would especially love to hear from you relating to this episode on how would you like to see television and media change to include more autistic experiences and voices. Did you know Autism Personal Coach provides neurodiversity affirming support by autistics for autistics? We empower autistic adults and teens to lead self-directed, purpose-driven lives through customized life coaching and community groups. Our distinct approach prioritizes each client's unique goals and preferences, fostering a sense of agency and promoting self-advocacy. Coaches work collaboratively with clients to develop personalized strategies and tools that can help with executive functioning, emotional regulation, relationship building, stress management, and much more. We also support parents and partners of autistic individuals by providing insights and guidance to bridge communication gaps and nurture mutual understanding. With our accessible remote services, individuals from any location can receive the assistance and mentoring they need. Join us today to experience judgment-free coaching rooted in empathy, expertise, and respect for autistic identity. Until next time, I'm Doug Bletcher of Autism Personal Coach. Talk to you then.